Welcome. We would like to call to order the June 3rd regular meeting of the Willoughby Eastlake City Schools Board of Education. This meeting is being held in accordance with Section 3313.15 of the Ohio Revised Code. Mr. Tornello, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Bear?
Here.
Mr. DeFranco?
Here.
Mrs. Verdi?
Here.
Mrs. Schatzman?
Here.
Mrs. Menser?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We would like to welcome everyone to our meeting this evening. To ensure all are aware of the way these meetings operate, we want to share the following. Prior to this evening, each board member has received for their review and consideration the agenda and materials associated with each agenda item for the board's approval. Board members can discuss the items with the superintendent and treasurer. Board members are not permitted per Ohio Meetings Act and Sunshine Laws to conduct conversations regarding board business outside of a public meeting. Tonight will be the first time the board can conduct conversations as a whole regarding the items on tonight's agenda. Board meeting agendas are always available through the district's website for public viewing prior to the board meeting. Community members can always email the board with questions or come and participate in the public comment portion of our meeting. Public comment provides an opportunity for the community to address the school board directly. In order to participate in public comments, participants would sign up before the meeting. When signing up, you are provided a copy of our public participation policy. Participants are asked to abide by those requirements. We will now move on to our agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve our agenda?
Madam President, I make a motion to approve our agenda.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Discussion? Mr. Charnello?
Mrs. Bear?
Yes.
Mr. DeFranco?
Yes.
Mrs. Verdi?
Yes.
Mrs. Schatzman?
Yes.
Mrs. Menser?
Yes.
Motion carries
We
5-0.
went out of order.
Did I go out of order?
No, I did.
Oh.
So I did too.
Everyone say aye. Aye.
I. It's summer vacation. All right, item 3A.
So thank you to Ms. Trident for helping us get the technology piece running. And then welcome to Mr. Phyllis. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. We've got our full board. And I'd love to just turn it over to you to give us a high-level overview introduction. And then at the end, we've saved some time if the board can ask you questions.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And Dennis Willard, our public relations director, is on the phone or is on the Zoom with me. And I'm going to begin this by giving just a broad view of not only the litigation, but also of the coalition. The coalition is in its 35th year of operation. We were formed in 1991 to litigate the school funding formula. We won 4 Supreme Court decisions in favor of the plaintiff school districts, and in about in 2020, 2021, and in that area, we were approached by some board members from Northeastern Ohio to see if we would be interested in coordinating an effort to challenge the constitutionality of the Ed Choice Voucher Program, and we readily agreed to do that. We have a steering committee, and Dennis, if you want to, can you share the screen?
I don't have screen sharing. I tried to share, but it was blocking me, Bill.
Okay.
I have a PowerPoint.
Can someone help us?
That may be a problem on my end. I'm not sure. It says that when I try to screen share, it says you may not have permission to do this.
Okay. Well, if
Can you try again?
if we could just pause for a minute here and so to see if we can get our PowerPoint in your view.
Yeah, Bill, I would just move ahead and I'll try to get it. I'll try to address it.
Oh, okay. Well, then, let me, just a quick note about the coalition. We have a steering committee of 27 members, 5 of which are attorneys. We have the former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court on our steering committee, as well as an OSU law professor, and then 3 other attorneys. So we have a steering committee that, and the steering committee is made up, by the way, of board members, superintendents, treasurers. And so we have a steering committee that's engaged in the education community as well as the legal community. So we're well positioned to manage this litigation, is what I want to say to you. Let me begin by just talking about the state responsibility for public education. Article 6, Section 2 of the Constitution says that the General Assembly shall secure by taxation or otherwise a thorough and efficient system of common schools throughout the state. So the state's responsibility is for the common school system, that is the public school system, the school districts of Ohio. The state has no responsibility for alternative programming, and until such time that the state legislature and the governor's office secures a thorough and efficient system. And by the way, the court ruled 4 times that the system was not thorough and efficient. And thus, the Cupp-Patterson bill that's before the legislature at this time that is being phased in might lead to a constitutional system of education. But since the state legislature has commandeered about $1 billion out of the school fund for vouchers, an additional $1 billion, besides the other choice programs that they've been operating, they said, well, we can't really completely phase in the fair school funding program because we don't have the money. But we did have the money. The state did have the money to provide $1 billion for vouchers, which is not the state responsibility to do. I'm going to ask Dennis Willard to identify the claims that we're making. Let me say that this is a full-scale assault on the Ed Choice Voucher Program. We want this system to be declared unconstitutional. That's the purpose of our litigation. And we thus far have really won every decision that the trial court has made thus far. So Dennis, if you could lead us through quickly the 5 claims that we're making against the state's voucher scheme. And by the way, it's only the Ed Choice Voucher Scheme that we are challenging. We're not challenging the John Peterson scholarships, the autism, or the Cleveland voucher program. It's just the Ed Choice Voucher Program. So Dennis?
Thank you, Bill. Very quickly, vouchers go on trial in Franklin County Common Pleas Court, Judge Jiza Page's courtroom on Monday, November 4th of this year. So this is the real thing. We're going to trial, and we have filed 5 counts of unconstitutionality against the system. Each of those counts have been accepted as valid by Judge Page, despite efforts by the Attorney General and outside forces like the Institute for Justice to dismiss our motions. The 5 counts, all we have to do is be successful on one of those 5 counts. The first count is that, as Bill mentioned, the Constitution is very clear. The state legislature is responsible for creating a single system of common schools for the common good. Vouchers, Ed Choice vouchers, create a separate and unequal system of schools, and we believe that's unconstitutional. The second count is, as Bill mentioned, the state has not funded thoroughly and efficiently the public school system. In fact, by their own measure, they have fallen hundreds of millions of dollars short in funding a constitutional system. Now, why that's important is because The money that goes to Ed Choice private school vouchers comes out of the same line item in the state budget that pays for public schools. So $1 more for private school vouchers is literally $1 less for public schools. That is count number 2. There's also an issue related to that that's very important to you as school board members and districts all around the state. And that is that as the state shifts the responsibility shifts $1 billion to private schools and private school operators, there's going to be a greater reliance on local property taxes to make up the difference. And that means that you will and others will have to go back to your voters more and more often to make up this loss in state funding. Because as you're going to see, there's not a loss in public school students. The vast majority of students taking vouchers today are already enrolled in private schools. They're not moving from public to private. They're being reimbursed. Their families are being getting rebates and refunds. That's count 2. Count 3, the fact is that although vouchers were sold as a way to help poor and minority families move from districts into other schools, the voucher program, the current voucher program, actually makes segregation in Ohio worse. And that's because private schools can and do apply litmus tests to who they let in. They can look at a family's financial status, and they do. They can look at academic and athletic ability, race, religion, disability. And for any of these reasons, they can say yes or no to a student coming into their school. They also can accept students in their school and then kick them out if they want and send them back to the public schools, which they do. You know who can't do that? Public schools. Your doors are wide open to all students who enter. And this worsens segregation. We're seeing this over and over again. And so that's count 3, and that's why we think the system's unconstitutional. Count 4, I'm just going to read you this. This is right directly from the Ohio Constitution. No religious or other sect shall ever have any exclusive right to or control of any part of the school funds of this state. That's Article 6, Section 2 of the Ohio Constitution. That basically says that money cannot go to religious schools. And there's, when we talk about the Constitution, we're always looking at what is the precedent? Is there precedent? Well, in this case, there's clear precedent. In the 1870s, there was a constitutional convention. There was a delegate who brought forth an amendment to the Constitution to allow for public funds, tax dollars, to go to private schools. It was soundly and wholeheartedly rejected. So the aim and the ideas here are not vague or fuzzy. They're clear. Our constitutional framers did not want private tax dollars going to private religious schools. What you find is more than 90% of the schools taking vouchers today are religious in nature. That's count 4. Count 5 is that basically this is a declaratory judgment. This means that unlike the DeRolf case, which was sent back to the legislature and said, fix the funding system, this is an up or down decision, yes or no. Are Ed Choice vouchers constitutional or not? If the court rules on just one of these 5 counts that it's unconstitutional, then the money flowing to these schools has to be cut off. And it's not sent back to the legislature to fix or the governor to fix. This says it's unconstitutional, the money can't flow there. And I just want to say we're not operating in a vacuum here. In state after state, in fact, there's a Washington Post story today that looks at the rise of vouchers across the country. This is part of ALEC and Betsy DeVos and the Koch family and others who are pushing a privatization and anti-public school agenda. But in state after state where this is happening, groups like Vouchers Hurt Ohio, people who love and want to protect public school education, are rising up to push back. In some cases, they're going to the governor where they have a at least an open ear. Some cases they're going to the legislature where they think they might be able to persuade the lawmakers to push back against this voucher idea. In this state, we feel that we do not have friendly faces in the legislature or the governor's office on this issue. So we have gone, like other states, have gone directly to the courts to stop this unconstitutional effort. Bill, I'll push it back to you now.
Well, I want you to know that this isn't something that's just being done in the dark corners. There are over 275 districts that have been, in the last 3 years, have been involved in the litigation. We have 5 plaintiff districts, but supporting districts in the range of 275, 280 districts. So there's a lot of interest in this statewide. And there's going to be more interest from suburban districts. In the past, we've had mostly the urban centers, Columbus, Dayton, Cincinnati folks. But the vast majority of the vouchers are going to students that are in suburban districts. And I think I sent information with regard to how many new vouchers have been applied from fiscal year 23 to fiscal year 24, and it's just an enormous.
Yeah, so
about-
I think Willoughby Eastlake, we were at something like 150, which, if I'm correct, included the Cleveland, the John Peterson, and the autism scholarship. And now we're at something like 653, which we're not even at the top of the list if you look at all of the districts. And we did not see a decline in enrollment. So that is consistent with the story that you're saying, which is that it's generally people who are not attending our schools who are taking advantage of the EdChoice vouchers.
And that's just the first year. Now we'll see another escalation next year because the legislation was passed and signed in the first part of July, and then people didn't necessarily have time to gear up to apply. So there will be a big bump between fiscal year 24 this year and next year. And so essentially what we have here is a situation where the general population is funding vouchers for a population that really probably can afford, the tuition on their own. Originally, the cry was, well, we need to let poor kids like in Cleveland escape the challenged school district and give them an opportunity for a private education. Well, this voucher increase has caused private schools to increase their tuition. So, poorer students are not going to be able to afford the difference between the voucher and some of the private school tuition rates. So this is really a program that white affluent families can take advantage of, and the rest of the population is subsidizing those families. We think this is really egregious. And of course, when we started this litigation, there wasn't a universal program, a voucher program. And so they've just exacerbated the problem since the litigation began.
Gotcha. One of the things I think we frequently hear in the media is that parents are just taking the money that they've already paid in and they're reallocating their own dollars. And, I'm a little bit closer to this and we've sort of had this conversation, but if you could walk us through a simple explanation of whether you feel like that's an accurate statement or a little bit misleading of a statement, and what you think is a good assessment of what's actually happening with these dollars.
Dennis, if you want to weigh in on that, and then I'll follow up.
Yeah, if I understand the question correctly, you're saying that there are families already taking the vouchers that are already in the private schools?
No, I was
So-
more talking about the idea that, like, we all obviously pay property taxes, right? So this idea that I'm just taking my property taxes that I'm giving to Willoughby Eastlake, for example, and reallocating them to private schools. I know that that's not a 1-for-1 ratio. There's people taking out much more than they're putting in. There's people not taking any out, right? So can you just speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. You know, one of the there's a lot of myths that are pushed by the pro voucher crowd. One of them is this idea of school choice and that the money follows the student. The fact is we all pay taxes. You in your district and every district in this state, there are people with children in the schools who are paying taxes to the schools to help the schools function. There are families and people in the community who do not have children in the schools. This is what is meant by our first count, that the legislature was to create a system, a single system of common schools for the common good for our communities. And so when you're talking about the money following the student, that's just not accurate. We make fun of this in a way by saying, well, why can't we have pool choice then? If I don't want to swim in the public swimming pool, why shouldn't I be able to take some of my tax dollars I pay to the local Parks and Rec department and dig a swimming pool in my backyard? This doesn't make sense, but it is one of the things they perpetuate. Now, I will say when you're talking to people in your district, and if you're talking to somebody who has a child in a private school, they're probably going to be all for this program. But what we have found is as school board members talk to the people in their district, that these vouchers are very unpopular because people get it. They get it. And now they're seeing that, you know, the scheme is really getting out of control. For example, last year in the 2022-23 school year, there were 24,320 Ed Choice vouchers. This year, and the application period is not closed, there's 90,000 plus applications. And yet there's not, as you've seen in your district, there's not a movement from public to private schools. So this is just a refund and a rebate program. But the real choice is in the power that the private school operators exercise. And as Bill mentioned, what many of them have done this year is they have raised their tuition and they've said, okay, we're going to get $8,407 for a high school student voucher. And we're going to raise our tuition by $4,000 and then give the families who are here a partial refund or rebate on their tuition they're already paying, but they're still going to pay money. They're like doubling down. They're getting the state money and they're getting money from the families. And what they're really doing is blocking any family from going into the private schools, because if the voucher doesn't cover the total cost, and they rarely do, a family without the means to supplement that voucher cannot transfer to a private school. That's unconstitutional in our mind.
I
hope that answers your question.
It does. I'm just going to ask a couple of questions. I'll try to keep them kind of yes or no and expand as needed. So I, as a homeowner in my district, pay roughly $2,000 to the schools each year. I have 3 children. I take them to a private school. That tuition is $4,000 for each child, which means $12,000, right? I paid $2,000 in. The tuition is $12,000. How much does the voucher pay per student at this time?
For a K through 8 child, there is an income scale here.
Yeah. So just
But for the highest voucher you can get for a K through 8 voucher is $6,165 per student, per child in your house.
okay.
So if you're a millionaire, and that's $8,407 for a high school student. Now, millionaires get less than that, but they also get a per student voucher.
Okay.
So basically this is why it's a universal voucher. Every child, regardless of the income of their family,
It's the same.
is eligible for at least a partial voucher right now.
Okay.
And it's just, again, what are we doing here? What we're doing is the state legislature has decided it is going to fund private religious education. we're not anti-private schools. We're not anti-religious education. We kind of agree with Eleanor Roosevelt. She said, I support private schools. I support private school education. I support parents paying for private school education. If they want to take their children and put them into a religious school, let them do that, but they should pay for it.
Can I ask a follow-up question? So as a taxpayer and as a community member that I do or don't have kids in the district, at this time, a community member can come to the public schools and express their joy and or dissatisfaction with how their tax dollars are being spent. And they can also ask for public documentation on how we're spending their tax dollars, as well as provide evidence of the curriculum and facilitation of learning. So as a taxpayer with public education, I have free access to understand how my money is being spent. Do you know if a private citizen went to a public or to a private school and said, I want to have evidence that you're using my tax dollars to my satisfaction? Is there anything that I as a taxpayer will be given to demonstrate that my money was spent, or I have a way to vote or have an opinion on how my money was spent?
That's a great, go ahead, Bill. That's a great question. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, there's no auditing of the tax money that goes into the private school. There's no accountability back to the public. It just kind of goes into a black hole. And so, taxpayers don't know what that money is being used for. It could be used for anything. So bottom line here is that the private school industry is largely unregulated, and it's unaccountable to the public. It's not transparent to the public, but yet public money is going into that enterprise. So, if private schools want to take public money, then they ought to go by the exact same rules as the public system. And if they go by the exact same rules as the public system, then what's the point in having a private enterprise?
I think that's where I'm coming from as a school board member, looking at fiscal responsibility as an elected official, trying to advocate for things that ensure that there's transparency in how public dollars are spent. So I think you answered my question. Thank you.
Yeah, just to kind of caveat off of what Krista asked. This isn't technically for what we're going on here right now. I had asked a few things a few months ago for transparency and openness. I'm still waiting for those. I might ruffle a little feathers there, but this is between us. We can talk about it later. But like as you said, there is a pay scale to said voucher system, correct?
For income?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like if I'm you said millionaire, billionaire, whatever, I think I get what, $600 per student is
I
the,
thought the minimum was, I think I'd seen 1,000.
oh, is it 1,000?
It's a sliding scale based on the income of the household.
So
I will
not
also say
everybody
this.
is paying
There's
full tuition.
speaking of accountability, there's no accountability. It's self-reporting. In fact, there's something written into the law that clearly states that the state cannot ask for proof of a family's income. So this is the honor system, and even the Republican chairman of the Finance Committee raised serious questions about this issue, saying that we're basically saying to families and to the private schools, you tell us what your income is, and we will then provide you with that kind of money. I will tell you, a public school couldn't do that. You couldn't say, we're going to just give you a number of students that we enroll so that you will give us our state share of funding per pupil without providing some evidence of that enrollment. So again, this system has very, very lax rules, very little or zero oversight or accountability.
So you're saying you don't need to provide tax return, anything like that? It's like I put in a form that says I make $50,000, then that's what they're going to base my sliding scale on.
That's right.
Well, you know, when you think about it, this is really egregious for a billionaire to be eligible for a voucher, whether it's $600 or, the full amount of $8,400 for high school. But think about that. A billionaire could claim a voucher in the state of Ohio. There's just something wrong with that picture. And this money would be coming from the general population. And so it's kind of like the lower income people are subsidizing the higher income people by them higher income people being eligible for vouchers and using vouchers. That's just wrong.
Do you guys have any other questions? Anyone? I was just wondering in closing, what's the current, I haven't looked in the last few weeks, the current estimates on the total line item of how much has been paid out? Or I guess, wasn't there a dispute at some point about like how much had been scheduled to pay out versus actually paid out? So I don't know which one I should ask for.
There is some, until June 30th, when the fiscal and school year ends, we really won't know. There has been an effort to try to determine what the spending is. What we do know is it's nearing $1 billion, and but schools can turn in for voucher money up until June 30th for this 2023-2024 school year. So we really won't know until the books are closed on June 30th. Now, I will say this, that in other states like Arizona, where this has happened, this has busted the budget. And in this state, when the Legislative Service Commission, which is sort of like the general accounting office for the state legislature, they are nonpartisan. They try to just, estimate what things will cost. Initially, they estimated that this was going to cost $1 billion. And Senate President Matt Huffman said that their numbers were wrong, that there was no way that this many families in the first year were going to go grab this many vouchers. Well, 90,000 plus have grabbed them already. We know that. And so there's not money in that line item to supplement all of this growth in vouchers. So they're either going to have to do one of two things. They're going to have to take some money from another part of the budget, the rainy day fund or whatever, and put it into that line item to balance that line item because of the unanticipated explosive growth in private school vouchers, or they're going to have to cut funding to public schools. But they got to balance that line item somehow. And that day of reckoning is coming on June 30th.
And there's plenty of precedents for cutting public school funding. When I was assistant superintendent of public instruction back in the 80s and early 90s, twice we had to cut the amount of money going to schools that they were promised because of a reduction in the overall state budget. This time it would be a reduction in the school budget, but there is precedent for cutting public school money. I lived through that as a state official.
I have a question. Say for instance, if there is a family that is dissatisfied in their own district with the academic scoring or some other egregious thing that they feel that they do they have school choice in the public sector as far as going to a different district that may be
I think open enrollment is what you're talking about, and that's if I'm correct, a local decision. So it's district by district can choose if they're open to it. Like around here, I want to say like Fairport Harbor is open enrollment. Willoughby Eastlake is not.
Kirtland's an open school, I believe. Yes, they are.
Yeah, that's not an issue we're addressing in our lawsuit because, there's a lot of obviously,
Yeah, it's just
you
a
work in
general
education
question. I
every day.
just
We're
was-
not addressing that in this lawsuit.
Yeah, but it's a district by district, so I can't necessarily be in one district and say I want to go to Willoughby Eastlake since our district doesn't allow for that. So it's not necessarily across the entire state, it's district by
That's
district.
Yeah, I
right.
just wanted to make sure that our guests here knew
Yeah,
that.
I think that's a good question, though. Okay, well, I think we'll follow up if we have any questions offline. Our plan as a board, I think, was to digest this and then probably discuss at length, either in a future board discussion or at a work session to see how we wanted to move forward. But I will get any follow-up questions and direct them to you guys if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. I threw our website into the chat and also how to join Vouchers for Soul Island into the chat as well. So thank you so much for this opportunity to present and answer your questions.
Thank you.
And I'd be glad to, at any time, day or night, answer your questions if you want to give me a call.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
So I think we can move on since we're going to discuss at a later time.
Thank you. Up next is for a public comment. Mr. Charnella, do we have anyone this evening?
Robert Tarr. Robert Tarr, 4680 Willowcroft, Willoughby, Ohio. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Last session, I gave you a homework assignment. This session is part 2 of the homework assignment. These 2 homework assignments give you the what. Next session, I will give you the homework assignment that is the where, why, how, and who. Okay? So if you could be so kind, I brought you each one of these. If you could be so kind, there's one for each of you, all 7 of you. So thank you very much for your time. Have a good night.
Thank you. Mr. Charnello, anybody else?
Tony, I'm sorry, Tony, I can't.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tony Hosevar. I live at 4903 Sweatland Boulevard in Richmond Heights, and I'm here to introduce myself as candidate for the 23rd House District. So I will probably be one of these folks that you will be looking forward to help you out in your funding issues. My history is such. I'm an Army veteran. I've always been self-employed, and I was a 20-year member at the governing board of the ESC of Northeast Ohio. So I intimately understand what our local districts are fighting through and what they're trying to achieve. The thing that stands out for me is the draw-off issue. That's been going on for years and years and years and years, and no one has put a stopper on that. I don't know where it's going to go. And as far as my ability to affect funding for the school, I'll be one of many, one of 99, but I can assure you that my door will be open, and you definitely can come to me. I also was actively involved at the OSBA. I was an executive member of the Northeast District. I was a master board member when they had that in place. I also was on the Federal Relations Committee. So my intimate knowledge of the public school system makes me a friend of public education. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Aaron Reedy.
All right, thank you again. I know this evening you're going to be discussing the mental health and with Crossroads.
Mr. Reedy, I'm sorry, can you please state your address?
You were correct, yes. Aaron Reedy at 28885 Chardon Road, Willoughby Hills, Ohio. Regarding mental health, Crossroads versus Signature Health. Signature Health is an agency here in Willoughby that I know there's been a lot of change over this year, and I hope that over this next year, you have an opportunity to talk more with parents who may be using Signature Health's services. I use them myself for my children, and they actually, it's kind of like comparing having a proctologist doing your neurosurgery. And you wouldn't want to do that. Signature Health is age-specific to the children and to the clients that they serve, whereas Crossroads is not age-specific to the client. Also, Signature Health, every single one of their providers is a licensed mental health therapist, and they are only using licensed mental health therapists with multiple years of education, of experience, whereas with Crossroads, when I've spoken to them, they are not doing that. Instead, they are using some of their staff because they have not been able to achieve the licensure to be a licensed mental health therapist. They're using other staff members. And not only is that dangerous, that would be asking that proctologist to do your neurosurgery with operation tools. And so over the next year, or between now and the next time you guys do a contract, I would highly recommend that you consult more, ask more details from Signature. Maybe you get Signature to come in here as well to do a presentation for the community so that everybody can understand. I still have people in the school district that are sending me emails, Mr. Reedy, who do you recommend for mental health for my children? Because they're just not, the needs aren't being met. And this is extremely important. Even my own daughter, I just recently found her using Discord to talk to somebody that she does not know. And even today, I had to leave work because we lost complete contact with my daughter. Talk about freaking out. Mental health is extremely important to me. As a therapist, I can't even talk to my own children as a therapist because it's an ethical violation. But it's extremely important that we have the absolute best providing the care, a licensed professional, and somebody who can meet the needs specific to the ages of the children in our district. And sorry I don't have a manifesto to hand out to you guys today, but I did want to make sure that I talked to you guys about mental health because it's extremely important. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Charnello?
Jim Clemens. Hi, everyone. I'm Jim Clements. I live at 5458 Kellogg Court in Willoughby. Abraham Lincoln is credited with saying, "Better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak and remove all doubt." It's something I always have to review in my own head before I come to this microphone. I wanted to just take a moment and thank you all, thank you, Dr. Ward, for how you've restructured your meetings and bringing in students, teachers, where you're recognizing their accomplishments. I don't remember the ratio, but there's one that teachers and social workers and parents and everybody learns that it's like a 5-to-1 ratio that if you can change a child's behavior if you do like a 5-to-1 ratio, and I may have the ratio wrong. Actually, I probably have the ratio wrong. But if you give more positive feedback than negative, that for every negative comment that you make, that if you balance it out with 5 others, that you will change their behavior over time. It's a refreshing approach that we have here. I've come to most of the meetings, Mary and I, over the past year. And I guess it's probably 250 to 300 students and faculty that have been recognized for the things that they do. Everything from athletics to arts to academics and everything in between. I think that sets the right tone. Sometimes in our meetings, we just have folks coming and poking holes at what we're not doing. And I think it's a refreshing change that what you're making here. You have a lot of superstars in this district. I would suggest that all of you, instead of thinking of yourself perhaps as an elected official, think of yourself as a servant leader. Your role is to give service and to support these guys and those guys in the back and the hundreds of staff that you have here caring for the more than 7,000 kids that come here every day to get an education, because some really fine things are happening. And I just wanted to compliment you all on what you've done this year. So thanks for doing that.
Thank you. There are no more speakers this evening. We'll move on to 5A, board discussion. There were no items for that, so 5B. Mr. Summers will be giving a brief presentation. Thanks.
Good evening. I'm Greg Summers with Summers Development Group. My address is 10585 Somerset Drive, Chardon, Ohio. Appreciate the opportunity to speak this evening. I don't know if you'd like me to start with a brief history on the Shanklin property and I guess how we've gotten here. So we, several years ago, we purchased the old YMCA property. And then that's where the new Aldi location was constructed. There's some residual property just to the south of there, I believe about 1.5 acres. And then the district owns a small, irregular shaped piece of property just to the south of our parcel. So we approached the school system, the school board several years ago, and we agreed to a purchase price, and we had it under contract to purchase that piece of property from the district. Due to basically just the timing with construction, the process with the city, and the zoning, it took some time and that contract expired. But, we since then got the development approved, with the city of Willoughby. And I just want to point out a couple of what we feel are the priority points. I also included a project overview and summary for you guys. There's an economic impact analysis that I'd like my coworker Alex to run through with you, or Ryan. And then there's the development plan, and then the landscape and buffer plan, as well as the sample elevations of what the townhouses would look like there. So before we get into any other details, I think this is one of the most important parts. Ryan, if you don't mind running through the economics.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having us in. Ryan Summers, 127 Public Square, Cleveland, Ohio. Our firm is PMC Finance, and we often partner with Summers Development Group, and we put this analysis together. It's economic impact analysis. The real highlights, though, are we're asking for no incentives from either the city or the school district standpoint, no tax abatement, no other support. And we're looking at significant investment of at least $4 million plus. These will be brand-new luxury low-maintenance homes, and at the end of the day, we think this will create $88,000 of annual revenues and tax revenues for the district. In over a 30-year period, that would amount to over $2.6 million. It'll also generate tax revenues and bring in new residents to the city. As you know, there's very little available for sale housing, and we think it'll be very well received. So happy to dive into any of these numbers. But we're hopeful that we could still start this year, and we have everything lined up in terms of financing and the approvals, as Greg mentioned.
So in terms of the parcel that you purchased from the YMCA, do you also own the parcel that Aldi is on, or you're saying you just own the parcel?
We developed all of it. So this is the residual from what Aldi's was constructed on. So it's now a separate parcel, but we owned it all, and this is the remainder parcel. We call it the residential parcel. That's everything that borders Aldi's to the south. Yes.
And so that now residual parcel that's been made residential and the parcel that we own, they were not zoned residential, but you guys have done work to zone them?
Correct.
Residential.
And receive approvals through both the Planning Commission and the city and Willoughby City Council.
Okay, and that was based on a contract. Sorry, and I joined the board in October 2022. So this is
Absolutely.
sort of, we heard about this, I think, a couple weeks ago, if I'm correct, for the first time. So I'm just trying to see, who was the original contract with? Was it with the board, or it was kind of just like discussion?
It was with the school district, and there's also an agreement with the Lake County Development Port Authority. So the agreement was with the district to purchase that, and it was the Lake County Port Authority is acting as a conduit for legal reasons.
But it had never gone to a board vote?
Yes,
You know,
yeah,
it did get into a board vote.
And it was approved.
With the board. I also want to add too, in addition to the numbers that Ryan just went through, we're also agreeing to cover all the board's costs associated with this too, all the legal fees, surveying, because I don't know if Dr. Ward can, if he knows offhand, but I think your legal counsel had said the school's incurred, you know, several thousand in costs over the years, just with getting it surveyed and, you know, just the general legal expenses, but we are, in addition to purchasing it, we're covering all the board's costs to date too, associated with this.
but to answer your question directly, it was approved by the board, not this board, obviously, but the prior board.
Were any of you guys on the board at the time?
So I have a question. If the board were to go through with this and sell the parcel to you, would you be going for a revision in the tax amount paid?
No.
So we had gotten some information that the parcel you do own was revised down because of the old agreement with the old board that you guys had submitted to the Board of Revisions. Is that?
It actually, so, and I talked to Dr. Ward about this, it was actually zoned commercial. So when you know, commercial property and residential property have a significantly different value.
Right.
So when it was parceled off into its own and rezoned into a small residential piece, the revision had to do with the rezoning, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And again, you know, since none of us were here making that decision from, you know, our vantage point, it a little bit feels like we didn't really, no one up here personally agreed to this and had knowledge of it. So we didn't necessarily know this was all being rezoned or that it was a board authorized or any of that. So I'm just wondering where some of that confusion came from since.
Yeah,
none of us.
Is there a copy of that contract?
Or a resolution that was formally taken by the board, and if so, can we have a copy of it, please?
We can,
We have the agreement. If you can't locate the resolution, I'm sure it's somewhere, but
Oh, yeah, we've got a
Yeah.
public records
Yeah,
policy.
yeah.
So I think it's just to be able to make a decision, the board wants to ensure, I mean, if contracts were signed and resolutions were passed, you know, there's precedence for how boards would proceed with that
Yes.
information. At this point in time, not having that present, it's a little piece of the story that we just want to make sure we have.
absolutely. And we recognize, because of the time and how long it took with the city, we're starting over with the new board, your board, you as a new board and new story, so we're happy to, you know, go through all the facts and
Right.
and what our plan is, fresh.
So I think that's what we're trying to do is get all of the information that we can get. And then I don't know if you guys have a current appraisal or if anyone's done a current appraisal, because obviously if this was several years ago and it was priced out and whatnot, I'm assuming just knowing what other properties have done, that maybe the property value has changed.
the legal counsel, I believe either for Peter, is either represents the board or the Port Authority. He actually ordered a new appraisal maybe in the past 4 months. So,
We have a copy of that too. We can send that.
Okay, great.
Yeah, it was done by a local commercial real estate firm.
Great. Do you guys have other questions?
Now, what age group, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, go ahead.
Now, what age group are we kind of leaning this towards? Because I know that area, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm coming down Shanklin, right-hand side's Aldi, I'm pulling up, I'm gonna see middle school and high school, correct?
yes.
Now
correct.
and I know that area is used by the band, sports, all the fun stuff. Now what age group are we targeting these townhomes for? Is it entry level?
So typically, we do a fair amount of townhouse development. They're gonna be first floor master. So typically, we'll see, you know, single people or empty nesters that don't wanna live in a big house and have all the maintenance, but still be close to everything that they're accustomed to being close to.
Right.
So typically, with this specific floor plan that we have planned for this project, it's very common to see either single people or empty nesters that are downsizing.
Okay.
So,
The reason I asked that is because, as I said, that area is used for band, and we all know high school bands. They're not quiet.
no, I understand. And
That's where I'm just having if a empty nester moves in there, they're empty nesters. They want peace, quiet, you know, they don't want to be bothered by the high school band, but some might. I'm just playing the devil's advocate here. You know, I'm just worried about, say, someone moves in there, they don't realize that's where band practice happens. Then they're like, oh crap. this isn't the best decision. And then we're left with townhomes that are not appealing to the market. That's where I'm just looking at the grand scheme of things. Worst case scenario down the line, is there any way that you guys are gonna I can't say you guys can guarantee that that won't happen, but is there anything that you guys are willing or able to put and set to, as in sound protection?
Yeah, so we, all of our communities have fencing, landscape, buffer. This will definitely have that. In fact, we have concerns about buffering with all these as well. But right now, we have, strong demand. If we had these available today, we're pretty confident they'd sell out in a month. So, and it would be, on the higher end, in terms of price and price point. So
What is the price point for them?
we think they'll be, go ahead, Greg, you're better.
Yeah, we probably close to 400. And I mean, that can vary a little bit, but, your point's well taken too, but I think, people that know Willoughby, we live local too. I mean, you hear train tracks, you can hear a school band. I mean, people that want to live in an urban environment and still be close to everything, I think, it's not going to be the same person that wants to move out to Madison and have 20 acres and, not hear a thing. But like I said, it's a well-received point, but it's not a concern of ours. We think of the people will like to live there and won't mind being close to the action per se.
Now, when you guys opened up, you guys mentioned bringing in new people to the community. Somebody from out of the community might not realize that that's what happens. That's where I'm.
Yeah,
that's
we would,
where I'm playing
we'd be
devil's
happy to
advocate.
put in writing that will be disclosed. We actually think, being on the walk to a football game on a Friday from your house.
Wouldn't be a bad idea.
It's going to be great, being on the walk to the grocery store, being on the walk to, the senior center, the Y, like all that we think is very appealing. But we'd be happy to, ensure that's disclosed.
Worst case, I just don't want to see this huge investment built right in front of our schools become vacant. That's what I'm worried about.
No, and Alex, that value is based on construction costs, right? So the 400,000 is not it's a fairly conservative. Very conservative number. So we think the tax value will actually be higher, but we wanted to just give you our cost. It's based on 280.
280,000 per unit.
And that price point is in today's market, correct?
Correct.
Today's crazy market.
Well, we're at 280, and as Greg mentioned, they'll probably sell for 400, and we have at least 2, maybe 3 builders that would buy them all. So we really feel confident this would not be, vacant, or this will be a really nice property to be a neighbor for the district.
So
No
as-
guarantees though.
So as a board, one of the things that we're using as a litmus test for decision-making is, are we being proactive in our decision-making? And we have, in the last 10 years or so, built properties in residential areas in which there have been noise complaints, issues with students having higher frequency of foot traffic with students, and that comes back to the district, and we are the permanent community partner with those residents. So just to ensure that there's things put in place to ensure that homeowners are very aware that we have a high foot traffic volume walking to and from on Shanklin from the schools daily. We have marching band that will practice. I've sat there, that metronome, I'll get to you. Anybody who's gone to band practice knows it. But it's really important that they understand where they're living. So, because we're going to have to be on the receiving end of those homeowners coming to board meetings, emailing our superintendent,
Yeah.
going to the school, directly engaging potentially with students while they're walking gainfully on public property like a sidewalk. And these are things that we want to consider and be proactive. So I would love to see what that disclosure would possibly look like, and how you could ensure after this, at the sale of the home, that it would occur. So that would be important to me, so that we have something in writing that says that you were being a partner and ensuring we were proactive in notifying that community. So that would matter to me.
We'd be happy to do that. This is our 5th school redevelopment in the last 36 months. We've successfully redeveloped a school in Mentor School District. We're doing one in the city of Brook Park right now. We've had to put what I'll call HOA documents together for Brook Park, where they wanted to be sure that certain maintenance things were also addressed. And we could get you a draft of what that would look like. Because I'm sure, in addition to the student interaction, you also want us to upkeep and have certain levels of quality, not just when we're done, but, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. That was their concern, and we just addressed that through council about a month ago. So we have some fresh set of documents.
We're gonna be neighbors.
Yes.
And then if something like that, HOA, I would strongly push to have have a board, because I know there's many HOAs out there that they have one guy that's been doing it for 30 years that doesn't give a crap anymore.
Well, the nice
They
thing
do
about
whatever the heck they want.
our
anyways.
project, it's all controlled by one board, one owner. So you don't have to worry about that one person not mowing the grass. We've addressed this, and we're also redeveloping a school in South Euclid right now with the South Euclid Lyndhurst schools. And that was another concern about like sidewalks and making sure everything was done by the developer. So I think we could hopefully get you comfortable there.
Yes, so I think that along with current appraisal and then past either resolution, contract, whatever was passed by prior board, if we can look all of that over, I think we would need that before we can make a decision.
Yes, I want to just thank you for coming and giving us this material. It's going to, really help us, and along with the additional things that we had requested. I just want to reiterate the fact that we just want damage control. We want to be proactive with what we could potentially see that's going to come and slap us in the face, basically. But my backyard was North High, so my house was right there but I loved it as a kid, so it was my playground, but thank you so much.
We appreciate your time. Like I said, sorry that, that it created some confusion with the time that passed in the previous board, but sometimes this stuff takes a long time, so. But we appreciate your time, and we'll follow up with all the information that we committed to.
Thank you so much.
Good evening.
Thank you
for your
for
time.
coming. Mrs. Schatzman, you're up with the legislative update.
Okay, I feel like I had a really long legislative update at the beginning, so I'll just let you know. There are many, many education bills that are moving through the Senate and the House, as well as new ones that are introduced, but there hasn't been any real changes passed out other than the most important one. Governor DeWine signed HB 250 into law, which included the mandate to districts that all districts need to have a cell phone policy prior to the start of next school year, not this school year. We, of course, already have a policy, but in addition to that, DEW released a model cell phone policy designed to really limit cell phone use during school hours. So we, as a board, have committed that we're going to have a work session this summer prior to the start of school to see if our policy is aggressive enough and really take a look at that. So I think all of us are looking forward to the research and information that we can take into account there. And then the Joint Property Tax Commission has concluded all of their public hearings, and although they have not provided any recommendations yet, said that they will do that by the end of the year. So as we get more information, I'll keep you guys updated on that direction, and I'll wrap it up there.
Thank you. Item 5D. Do I hear a motion to approve 5D legal counsel appointment?
Madam President, I have a motion to approve 5D.
Do I hear a second?
It's a consent
It's a
item.
consent.
Oh.
Yeah, that's okay. We all agree.
Okay.
We'll vote on it later.
Dr. Ward, did you want to talk about the legal counsel appointment?
I can. So as you know, we have a number of, lawyers and firms on retainer. This would just be another one we'd add to our group that we get access when things come up. May specialize in things that help support the district. I've known John and his firm for a while from my previous district, and picks up the phone, very knowledgeable, and definitely provides proactive counsel about making good decisions that keep us out of trouble. So
Thank you. Item 6A, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of May 8th, 2024?
Madam President, I move to approve 6A minutes, May 8th, 2024.
Do I hear a second?
Madam President, I second.
Discussion? Mr. Charnello?
Mrs. Bear,
Yes.
Mr. DeFranco,
Yes.
Mrs. Verdi,
Yes.
Mrs. Schatzman,
Yes.
Mrs. Menser.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
6B, do I hear a motion to approve minutes of May 13th, 2024?
Madam President, I have a motion to approve minutes from May 13th.
Do I hear a second?
Madam President, I second that.
Discussion? Mr. Charnello?
Mrs. Bear,
Yes.
Mr. DeFranco,
Yes.
Mrs. Verdi,
Yes.
Mrs. Schatzman,
Yes.
Mrs. Menser.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Moving on to 6C, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of May 30th, 2024?
Madam President, I motion to approve minutes from May 30th.
Do I hear a second?
Madam President, I second.
Discussion? Mr. Charnello?
Mrs. Bear?
Yes.
Mr. DeFranco?
Yes.
Mrs. Verdi?
Yes.
Mrs. Schatzman?
Yes.
Mrs. Menser?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Mr. Charnello?
Thank you. This month, we do not have the monthly financials on the board agenda. The first of the month was on Saturday, and there was just simply not enough time with moving the board meeting up a week to get the month closed out and get the financials completed. And the month is still not closed out. Usually takes us a couple days. So get it on a later agenda. 7A, temporary appropriations. This is to put a temporary budget in place for July 1, since June 30 is the fiscal year end. The July meeting would be July 8th. So we need to make sure we have a budget in place for July 1st, and that's what this resolution is for.
Do I hear a motion to approve 7A?
Madam President, I make a motion to approve item 7A.
Do I hear a second?
Madam President, I second that.
Discussion? Mr. Charnello?
Mrs. Bear?
Yes.
Mr. DeFranco?
Yes.
Mrs. Verdi?
Yes.
Mrs. Schatzman?
Yes.
Mrs. Menser?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. All right, next we have the Willoughby East Lake Public Library budget. Just like the appointments of their, believe what are they called?
Board.
Of their board trustees. Since we are their elected body, also their budget has to go through you all as well.
Do I hear a motion to approve 7B?
Madam President, I motion to approve 7B.
Do I hear a second?
Madam President, I second.
Discussion? Mr. Charnello?
Mrs. Bear?
Yes.
Mr. DeFranco?
Yes.
Mrs. Verdi?
Yes.
Mrs. Schatzman?
Yes.
Mrs. Menser?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. 7C, advance of funds. This is due to the 024 Health Insurance Fund not having enough funds to meet the Ohio Revised Code Section 9.833. However, silver lining, last year we did have to advance $2.7 million, so we're definitely moving in the right direction. $1 million is a lot less than $2.7 million, so definitely moving in the right direction in regards to the health insurance fund. Transfer of funds. This is to move funds from one year to the next for the American Rescue Plan, also known as ESSER. These are COVID dollars, and this is just to be able to close fiscal year 22 and 23 because one has a positive balance of $22,907.66, the other one has a negative balance of $22,907.66. So there was just a little movement we need to do between the two funds years to get those cleaned up.
But then there's no more ESSER accounts anymore.
Those were for those 2 years. Fiscal 24 is this year, and this year is the last year.
Thank you.
Yes. 7E, purchase orders. As we were winding up the year, or wrapping it up, we have a couple purchase orders that we placed for an extended period of time that had invoices exceed the purchase order amount. One was Pressworks. This is for our community updates that were being mailed out. And as this was our first year, we just underestimated what that was going to be. Lake County YMCA, we reimbursed the YMCA for half of the legal bills associated with ongoing litigation. And after all of the subpoenas went out, the legal bills got a little higher than what they were, so the purchase order was exhausted. And then the last was the illuminating company, and that was for a very extended period of time, and we just happened to have the invoices exceed the purchase order. And that's what those three purchase orders are. And 7F, we have a few donations. Operation Keepsake donated $1,000 to Willoughby Middle School to be used for the students. Costco Workplace Giving Campaign donated $480 to Eastlake Autism. Willoughby Eastlake School of Innovation PTO donated $2,558.27 to be used for field trip transportation, tickets, and program fees. The Soy PTO also donated $250 for author Ben, his question and answer Zoom session. Playhouse Square Foundation donated $267 to grant for their second grade field trip. And the Longfellow PTA donated $2,242.58 for field trip transportation. So thank you to all of those donors.
Thank you. Dr. Ward?
Yeah, I'm really excited to invite up tonight our Community Advisory Committee. They completed a full cycle this year of a committee that was a long time in the making. And so they struggled with early on trying to find the cycle and the rhythm and how this was going to work, but they found their way. They had student voice included. They had a spirited debate at times, and they tackled communication this year. And then they looked forward to think about what they're going to do next year. And so before I turn it over to Jen Dodd, I'm going to go ahead and ask Krista if you have anything else you want to chime in on, because I know this was a really important committee.
Straight from the heart. I really appreciate the committee. The first year of doing anything, you go to school. You really learn about how, what, where, why, when. And we've learned from this experience, and I hope that it expands. And I know we have the right leadership in place to hopefully continue on and engage the community. And I know that the executive committee learned a little about what they need from those that are on the committee and maybe how to run meetings. And there's a lot we have to grow and learn. And I know that I learned a lot sitting in as a board member, and I feel that it's good maybe to have other board members come next year and sit in and just listen, and to hear different community members' voices. The 2 students that we had were phenomenal. And just in a few short conversations, they gave insights to the student side of the story with communication. And I think what still sticks with me is our middle school and high school students, parents oftentimes are not cross-communicating what the school's communicating. So if I, as a parent, receive something on final forms, my student is not necessarily receiving it. And if I, as a parent, don't disseminate that information to my student, they may miss out on opportunities. So finding better ways to communicate internally as well as externally could be something of a focus next year. So really loved participating. I want to thank each of you for allowing me to be a de facto member.
Floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Ward. I have copies if you guys need them, if you want to take notes or anything. So for those that I don't know, I'm Jen Dodd. I am an alumni from here longer ago than I care to admit. Until 2 weeks ago, I was a parent here. I'll start crying again, but for 22 years. So now I'm an invested community member, I guess. So I had the pleasure of serving as secretary on the executive committee for the Community Advisory Committee. And Andrea, if you want to go to the next slide. So our executive committee consisted of Nancy Knack was our chair, John Roscos and Aaron Reedy were our co-chairs, and all 3 of them are here with me tonight. So we had 14 members total. They included parents, as Krista mentioned, students, staff, residents, and about 85% of those 14 members were regularly attended our meetings. We had 4 meetings this year, and so we really started to gel as a group and find out what we were all about. So the first thing we did actually is we heard from Westlake, and this is kind of where some of the idea came from, the Community Advisory Committee. Now theirs, I think, is decades in the making, so they were way more sophisticated than we were, and we had to slim down some of their bylaws because we weren't ready for everything in the bylaws. So what we did is we created bylaws for us, and knowing that we can always go back and revise the bylaws as the group grows and evolves. So the purpose per our bylaws is to engage in constructive and productive conversations and planning in order to help identify needs and strategies for improvement in order to serve the community, the school system, the superintendent in the capacity with their board, and to serve as a liaison between the community and the superintendent. And we really had to practice and honed in on the constructive and productive, because when you get any group of people together, you could just talk around in circles about any one topic. So we had to take these conversations and realize what they were for and kind of move them forward so that we could make some recommendations, which is what you'll see at the end of this. So this year, our conversation or our research topic was communication. And as I mentioned, at the beginning of the process was adopting the bylaws. And then one of our first meetings, we had a communication brainstorming session. So we had poster board on the walls. And one of the things that we posed was, I wish I knew more information about. And it was actually a really good conversation. And when we took back their notes, we put them into these 7 areas. So events and activities, curriculum and teaching strategies, taxes and district finances, how to volunteer, extracurricular opportunities, how to communicate with teachers and principals, and district and school success stories. So you can see some of them needed to know how to engage in more communication, and some of them wanted to know more information about one thing or another. We also had asked at those meetings, how do you receive your communication from your district and your school? How do you want to receive your communication from your district and your school? And we actually took the initial conversations about those and created a survey, just a Google survey that we sent out to our members, our 14 members. And one of the key pieces that we got back was the how do I want to receive communication? And so what you see there, the first 3, those were our top 3 responses. So number 1 and 2 are actually tied at 66.7% for the district website and social media. And then also annual reports was number 3, but that was down at like 44%. But then we took that information, and then we had more of our conversations and the discussions, the anecdotes, the experiences, the needs. And some of the gaps that we talked about was getting information to non-parents. That was a recurring theme, right? Because even if communication could be improved for our parents, they have a method of communication. So one of the biggest areas was getting them to the non-parents. One of the other discussions we talked about is there's so many ways to communicate now. Technology gives us emails, people do newsletters, you do annual reports, there's social media on a lot of different platforms, a lot of different people posting on different social media platforms. And then plus the website. And so there were multiple communication streams, but they were sometimes disconnected. One of the really important things that we talked about was being able to distinguish between facts and rumors. So when you talk about social media especially, people can put whatever they want on social media, and then anybody can take whatever information they want. And so finding ways to understand the difference between the facts and the rumors. And then also there was a sincere desire to promote pride in the district and the schools. That's what people were talking about, wanting more success stories and understanding what's really going on, how they can participate, how they can volunteer. So we have 4 recommendations for the administration. Now, one thing I want to remind you is these are really, really high-level recommendations. So we are not in the business of telling anybody how to do the work in the midst of the complex work they're doing every day. So our first recommendation is a comprehensive, streamlined, and accessible district website. So as we've mentioned, we have a website. Lots of school districts have websites. But what would be helpful would be to create consistency across the main page, the different school district pages, so that people know where they can find things, especially as the kids move from one school to another and move up grade levels. Also, another piece to that, when we talk about comprehensive, is the multiple streams of information I mentioned, emails, newsletters, social media, and then on a Saturday, your kid reminds you of something, you're like, okay, I know I saw something about that, but where did I see it, right? So if there's a repository to go for all of that information, our suggestion is that is the website. Number 2 is to do a full community survey. So we did a survey among our 14 members, and we thought some helpful information, but we aren't experts in doing surveys. We're not experts in communication. And so before we look at any other suggestions, it's really important, I think, for the district to do with an expert company, a full community validated, full-scale community survey. And that may guide some other recommendations beyond what we are offering here. And then on the last slide, there are 2 more. So question and answer portal. So we talked about the how you distinguish between fact and rumor, how you get more information, how you get clarification. So sort of a Ask Dr. Pat question and answer portal type of thing, right? So where questions can be posed and they can get the actual information, the actual answers back to their questions. And then also a social media coordination. Now this could be a huge task but some way to coordinate monitoring what is on different social media pages and even responding to that, and again, to try to create the difference between fact and rumor. So I would ask the rest of the team if there's anything else you want to add.
The other thing we thought about the social media communication and the coordination is to get either our teachers involved with students who are in this field and see if we couldn't do some type of a project, project-based learning for them to do some of this. So it would get the kids involved along with it. Some type of an extracurricular or, something like that we could involve everybody in. You can see it from the kids' side, the student's point of view, teacher's point of view. I know just from sitting in the office as principal secretary, people will call me and I see it myself being in there. The district web pages, the blue and green and white, which is perfect. But then when you get to all of the different, if you're clicking on the schools, it looks so much like the main district webpage, you don't know where you're at. And if you're unfamiliar with it, you don't know where you're going with it. So that was another big issue, if we could have consistency across. Maybe like each webpage, school's district webpage needs to be the color the school is. Like orange and black for North and blue for, just go through the colors. This way, when you knew that, you had a total distinction, or take every school's individual logo instead of just having the Willoughby Eastlake with the white and green emblem, is to put on each one of those web pages the individual school's logo. This way, at least you knew when you were on a different one, you were in Willoughby Eastlake, but you were in that individual school. So, but I really like the thought process with having as much communication and input from the students and teachers, and have it be project-based.
So,
We're very excited about their engagement with the recommendations that they're giving. And one thing that I remember that the two students had mentioned is the disconnect between the information they were getting and the information that their parents were getting. Sometimes one would get it and the other one wouldn't, and so that causes additional confusion. So they were more than excited to be more engaged in the process.
So we took lots and lots of recommendations and put them down into 4 really high-level, big picture. So unless you guys have any question, I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to say that I love the idea of the community survey so that we can have a benchmark on sort of the sentiment of how people are feeling and then how we're doing over time. I think our first kind of in recent history foray into that was when we did the superintendent search, and I think people really valued being able to give their input. So I would love to see the district do something like that again.
Yeah, establishing a baseline is going to be really important as we begin important work, and we have a committee structure set up next year to unpack all of that.
Oh, and I would like to say something. I really want to thank you all for doing this. This is such a great idea, especially involving the kids and getting them excited. That is wonderful. Thank you so much for what you did. Appreciate it.
Good point. Thank you for your hard work.
We got a lot cut out for us on the We Experience Committee, 24, 25.
So item 8B, graduation, really quickly. I'd be remiss if I did not mention, if you had a chance to attend our graduation, either one of the commencement ceremonies we had downtown, it was absolutely some of the most incredible and amazing testimony of our students and this community. We had over 500 graduates, and what was most, I think, impressive to me, and feel free to chime in, was to hear the accolades of what our students accomplished during their time in Willoughby Eastlake schools. Each principal from both of the high schools had time to highlight the students, their accomplishments, and the things that they have done during their time here. And I'll be honest with you, I've said this a lot, but the closer you get to the ground in Willoughby Eastlake, inside the buildings, the day-to-day, the better we look. And I remain incredibly impressed and moved as a member of this community, as a father who sends their children to the school, and as a superintendent at a year that truly was remarkable for these students. And we would like to wish them the best as they go off, as graduation often has that vibe. So it was wonderful.
Keep going.
Wishes was short. All right.
There's only a couple.
Yeah. Let's start with item 9A. So I want to go ahead and thank Andrea for spending the time to do a comprehensive review of our printed services and our copy services. She conducted the bid process. She scored them on a rubric, and she was thinking long-term about the well-being of the district, not just over the life of this particular contract, but for years beyond that. And so kudos to her for conducting that work. And so you'll see that in 9A and 9B. 9A would be our printed service agreement.
Do I hear a motion to approve 9A, Managed Print Services Agreement?
Madam President, a motion to approve item 9A.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Discussion? Mr. Charnello?
Mrs. Bear,
Yes.
Mr. DeFranco,
Yes.
Mrs. Verdi,
Yes.
Mrs. Schatzman,
Yes.
Mrs. Menzer.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. Maybe next year we'll splurge for another mic.
Coming from the treasurer, that's impressive. 9B, copier lease agreement. Same logic as the previous.
Do I hear a motion to approve 9B?
I motion to approve 9B.
Do I hear a second?
Madam President, I second.
Discussion?
I guess just one thing I wanted to say was additional kudos, Mrs. Trident, because we received a communication today, and having evidence to support the decisions that are made at a ground level helps support this board's ability to make decisions and to vote, and the fact that you had a process and evidence to support the recommendation is what we ask for to conduct our jobs, so thank you.
Mr. Charnello?
Mrs. Bear,
Yes.
Mr. DeFranco,
Yes.
Mrs. Verdi,
Yes.
Mrs. Schatzman,
Yes.
Mrs. Menzer.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
So 9C, again, I want to commend the board for the time you spent investigating the food service contract. We did a work session the other night. Wasn't a quick one. It was a thorough and in-depth presentation. I almost felt bad going home and eating chicken nuggets that night. So 9C would be our food
Were
service
they the
agreement.
school special made?
You got that
chicken
right.
nuggets?
Food service
Perfect.
agreement. Item 9C.
Do I hear a motion to approve 9C?
Madam President, I move to approve 9C.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Discussion?
Sorry, I have to have some discussion about this one.
I knew
So,
that was coming.
so first of all, I want to thank everyone who was involved. I really appreciate Mr. Johnson for the thorough presentation. Mr. Patrick, I know you weren't there, but I know you contributed. And then everyone in food services and Chartwell's Compass Group who came and talked with us. This was really, again, the board trying to understand the entire bid process, what goes into that, what Chartwell's covers, what's covered by the district. And then we had a lot of questions about the food our kids are eating. It's, you know, the research shows sadly that many children are getting their only full nutritious meal a day at school. This is why personally you'll always see me sharing stuff about how kids can get food over the summer when they're not in school. So we wanted to ask about the quality of the ingredients, the packaged food that they're eating. You know, many actually of the recipes are from scratch, are made in our kitchens. We're getting things from local farms. But in addition to that, even some of the packaged foods, we learned that they have 35% less sugar than the same product you would see on the shelf. So like a Trix yogurt, if you get it at school, it's healthier than the one on the shelf. It looks exactly the same. Pop-Tarts, same thing. They're whole grain Pop-Tarts. You can't even buy them at the store. One board member might have a child who loves the school Pop-Tarts.
She may have to buy 30 packages at the beginning of the year and bring them home.
Right.
Yeah,
But
like
but we got lots of information that we didn't know, and I think the big thing that came out of it was how do we share a lot of this good information with our community, with our parents, about nutrition, about the things that we're doing, about the things we're thinking about. So first step we included with our board agenda is some presentation materials that, again, Chartwell's got ready for us really quickly to put on this agenda. So I'm just really thankful that we went through this process, and I couldn't be happier with the result.
One thing that I really enjoyed and loved was that how much food we got locally. I was surprised. I was surprised to see that, and it actually settled my stomach. No pun intended, but I settled that there. It for me, it's a lot about the food that our kids are intaking and having it grown and made and produced locally meant the world to me. Expect some of the stuff that we have, like you were saying, is made in our kitchens, and it came as I think the furthest one came was Berlin Heights, Collins, Ohio, Jefferson, Ohio. A lot of this stuff's all in the agenda tonight, but it was very pleasing to see that.
Absolutely.
That's just not coming from McDonald's, but.
I also want to say thank you to Chartwells. They provided us with a plethora of information, and there are documents that are uploaded into the board agenda. If anyone is interested in reviewing them, they are there for the public to see as well.
Yes, there was a variety of team members that came in. And, we were pleased to see, an official dietitian. There was a chef there. They were very accommodating to all our questions. They answered them very thoroughly for us. And we walked away with a lot more confidence. So thanks again. Appreciate it.
I think there was some highlights, and that is that Chartwells, because of our sustained relationship and the renewal of the contract, we have a reduction in fees, so there was some cost benefit to the continued relationship. Additionally, learned a lot about the functional hurdles that the staff that's locally hired and works in our district has to overcome to really live up to the really fun things that they can do to be a partner with the district. To include, we are getting a bicycle that can be ridden, connected to a blender so that children can make smoothies. And we had some great conversation, I think, too, also with Chartwells at a higher corporate level and a local level to say, how can we better partner to uncover opportunities, to build stronger relationships with kids and their food and the people who serve them. And also, I think we came up with a couple of neat ideas too. We uncovered some things that maybe we can learn about how to better communicate to our parents about the food that their kids are eating. And we all see it on Facebook. I'm a parent, my kid comes home, he's like, I just ate nachos today. Really? Just nachos? That's all you got? That's all they gave me. They didn't just give you nachos. So understanding the procedure and protocol for how food is served, what they are required to do, what children are required to walk away from the line with, I think is important information for our parents to know, so they can have better conversations with their children at home to be like, well, why did you only eat nachos today? Because I know you got A, B, and C. And then it has to start in the home, and that's also a big part of the conversation we have with Chartwells. All the efforts can be for naught if we're not partnering with our parents. We need to invite them in. So that was another takeaway, which helps me with my vote today. Thank you.
Mr. Tornello?
Mrs. Bear?
Yes.
Mr. DeFranco?
Yes.
Mrs. Verdi?
Yes.
Mrs. Schatzman?
Yes.
Mrs. Menser?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
So at the same work session, we also talked about student services. We reviewed the student survey data. We talked about Willoughby Eastlake's tiered system of support when it comes to how we support our students in Willoughby Eastlake schools. We talked about Crossroads being just one part of that puzzle at Tier 3 for some of the more intensive needs that some students may have. We also talked about the fact that typically in Tier 3, the percentage of students that live in Tier 3 is about 7%, and that's consistent with the number of students in Willoughby Eastlake that access these services in the past year. We also talked a lot about the Willoughby Eastlake, the We Experience Committee, potentially being a place where we can continue to look at this yearly contract and continue to ask, are these services meeting the needs of our kids today? We did reach out to competitors. We did ask for feedback from them. And then we asked Crossroads, who has a long-standing relationship with the district of over a decade, to match what was in that contract. And they were willing to do that this time. And so we felt at this point, given the magnitude of change and all things being equal, this was a really solid Tier 3 support.
Do I hear a motion to approve 9D Crossroads Health Agreement?
Madam President, I motion to approve 9D.
Do I hear a second?
Madam President, I second item 9D.
Discussion?
I think one of the things that we took away from this conversation, and Dr. Ward is already driving these efforts, is to be more data-driven in our decisions for the services that are provided to our students and staff. And one of the questions I asked as a board member is, what information do we gain from the Crossroads survey? So in the bottom of newsletters at all schools, I had seen it. I have a child in elementary, middle, and high school. And on each of those, there was an opportunity for me as a parent to select the Crossroads link and provide feedback. And that's what matters to me as a board member, is those parents and families directly receiving services from Crossroads, are they satisfied? So we had a 77.8% of respondents express the highest level of contentment. And we had high numbers overall on almost all categories within that survey. So we will continue efforts to be more data-driven and make sure we're engaging with those receiving the services, so we have that information in advance of deciding. And I look forward to the We Experience Committee really kind of diving into that, because mental health is such an important component of our functioning schools being healthy.
Thank you. Mr. Charnello?
Mrs. Bear,
Yes.
Mr. DeFranco,
Yes.
Mrs. Verdi,
Yes.
Mrs. Schatzman,
Yes.
Mrs. Menser.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
All right, 9E is a memorandum of agreement with WIDA. This would be for teachers in the SAIL program who, because of the students, often forfeit their lunch, and as a result, we compensate them for that.
Do I hear a motion to approve 9E?
Madam President, I move to approve 9E, MOU with WIDA, or MOA, I guess, with WIDA.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Discussion? Mr. Charnello?
Mrs. Bear,
Yes.
Mr. DeFranco,
Yes.
Mrs. Verdi,
Yes.
Mrs. Schatzman,
Yes.
Mrs. Menser.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
9F would be another MOU. This MOU would be just for the summer period for some of our food service employees that feed kids during our summer programs. We had to adjust the pay scale because we did not do that for the summer, so.
Do I hear a motion to approve 9F?
Madam President, I motion to approve item 9F.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Discussion? Mr. Charnello?
Mrs. Bear,
Yes.
Mr. DeFranco,
Yes.
Mrs. Verdi,
Yes.
Mrs. Schatzman,
Yes.
Mrs. Menser.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Item 9G, this would be the ratification of the tentative agreement with OPSI Local 159. And I know, I saw Karen here earlier tonight. And I just want to take this opportunity again to thank our union leadership for their commitment to advocating for their members, but also keeping the strategic, bigger picture of the district in mind as well. That's often a relationship that you don't find, and we're just really blessed here to have really great union leadership across the board. So kudos to them on a fair contract and a great process that was really collaborative.
Do I hear a motion to approve 9G?
Madam President, I move to approve 9G.
Do I hear a second?
Madam President, I second.
Discussion? Mr. Charnello?
Mrs. Bear,
Yes.
Mr. DeFranco,
Yes.
Mrs. Verdi,
Yes.
Mrs. Schatzman,
Yes.
Mrs. Menser.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
So along those lines, item 9H would be the ratification of the tentative agreement with OPSI 163. Also want to reach out and thank Ken Pressler for his work with this process, highly collaborative. Again, keeping and balancing the needs of his members to the strategic priorities and bigger picture of the district. Thank you, Ken, for that collaborative work on this contract.
Do I hear a motion to approve 9H?
Madam President, I move to approve 9H.
Do I hear a second?
Madam President, I'll second that.
Discussion? Mr. Charnello?
Mrs. Bear,
Yes.
Mr. DeFranco,
Yes.
Mrs. Verdi,
Yes.
Mrs. Schatzman,
Yes.
Mrs. Menser.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
I also want to thank Nancy Knack for her work. She's working hard to get this wrapped up as well. And I know we'll see that hopefully within the next couple of weeks with our last union, which is WESEP. So stay tuned. Item 9I, never had a 9I, I don't think, so. Recall, we created the associate principal positions and redistributed the existing administrative team into those positions. And so in order to do that, we needed to make sure that we could compensate them. So you'll see here the salary schedule.
Do I hear a motion to approve 9I?
Madam President, I have a motion to approve 9I.
Do I hear a second?
Madam President, I second 9I.
Discussion? Mr. Charnello?
Mrs. Bear,
Yes.
Mr. DeFranco,
Yes.
Mrs. Verdi,
Yes.
Mrs. Schatzman,
Yes.
Mrs. Menser.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
9J would be our adult nursing salary schedule. This comes out of NCI East.
Do I hear a motion to approve 9J?
I guess we don't have to do that because this would be,
No,
No.
it's K, we don't.
Madam President, I move to approve 9J, adult nursing salary schedule.
Do I hear a second?
Madam President, I'll second 9J.
Discussion?
It really is summer, isn't it?
Mr. Charnello?
Mrs. Bear?
Yes.
Mr. DeFranco?
Yes.
Mrs. Verdi?
Yes.
Mrs. Schatzman?
Yes.
Mrs. Menser?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
All right, now we're on the consent agenda. 9K would be our school fees for 24-25. 9L would be our co-curricular activity fee schedule. 9M would be our contract for furnishing school pictures. So that contract was 2 years, but in the second year, we had a chance to change if we weren't happy, and so we are making a change there. 9O would be surplus sale
You missed
agreement.
N.
Did I?
Special services
L,
agreement.
M.
Oh, that's an
N,
important one. Yeah,
O.
look at that. It's summertime, we said it. 9N would be our special service agreements with students that we serve outside the district for programs that we don't have on our campuses. 9O would be our surplus sales agreement with Fast Track Marketplace. This would be to auction furniture at the middle level that we are going to replace. 9P, which I'm certain this is a milestone here. Adoption of the policy for the Northern Career Institute Graham Leach Biliac Security Plan. Wiley? Bliley, you're right. The glasses aren't working.
You're still up.
I
but
know.
We start a new
All right.
number, so we start over.
All right, 10A, administrative personnel. So you'll see recommendations for many of our principals that we hired this year who are in that, it was a 2-year contract, so we often extend it. You'll see them listed there. We have a pretty exceptional administrative team. Certified personnel, 10B. Some of our new hires, which will meet in the fall at our new employee orientation. Future looks bright for Willoughby Eastlake there. 10C would be our classified personnel. And then 10D would be supplemental contracts.
11A, meeting notification. The next regular Board of Education meeting is scheduled for Monday, July 8th, 2024 at 6 PM here at the Administration Building, 35353 Curtis Boulevard in Eastlake. Do I hear a motion to approve 12A, adoption of consent calendar?
Madam President, I motion to approve 12A.
Do I hear a second?
Madam President, I'll second 12A.
Discussion? Mr. Charnello?
Mrs. Bear?
Yes.
Mr. DeFranco?
Yes.
Mrs. Verdi?
Yes.
Mrs. Schatzman?
Yes.
Mrs. Menser?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
13A, do I hear a motion to adjourn to executive session for appointment and/or employment of a public employee, and no action will be taken after executive session?
Madam President, I move to adjourn to executive session for the purpose of appointment or employment of a public employee.
Do I hear a second?
Madam President, I second 13A.
Discussion? Mr. Charnello?
Mrs. Bear?
Yes.
Mr. DeFranco?
Yes.
Mrs. Verdi?
Yes.
Mrs. Schatzman?
Yes.
Mrs. Menser?
Yes.
We're in executive session at, I don't even know, my phone turned off.
7:43.
7:43.